I'm going to talk about perception. And the reason why I'm going to talk about perception is that's my work. So I'm a neuroscientist. And perception underpins everything that we do. It is the basis of being human. From the things we know, the things we think, what we believe, what we hope, our dreams, everything begins with perception. And so I'm going to tell you the story of being human in the simplest of our perceptions, which is seeing color. It doesn't get any easier than seeing light. Even jellyfish see light, and they don't even have a brain. Okay? But in seeing light, that holds the key to understanding what it is to be human. Now, color begins with light, but it is not the perception of light. That might seem a bit odd. So, if seeing light meant always seeing light as it really is, then when you see two squares that are physically the same, they should always look exactly the same. But if we take those two squares and put them in different surrounds, different context, their perception changes. So you now see the square, the small square on your right, as being darker than the square on your left. And yet physically, they're exactly the same. So context is everything when it comes to seeing light. In fact, context is everything when it comes to seeing anything. So if we could understand that simple illusion, if we could understand why context matters, we would not only understand how the brain works, we would also understand what it means to be human. So, why? Why does context matter? The reason is because the light that falls into your eye, all sensory information, is inherently meaningless. In fact, all information is inherently meaningless. There is no behavioral value in information. And to prove that point, I want you to imagine that this is the back of your eye, okay? And these are two projections from the world onto the back of your eye. They're physically identical in every way. They're identical in shape, spectral content, size. Everything about them is the same. As far as your eye is concerned, they are the same. And yet they come from completely different sources in the world. So the one on the left comes from, which you can see, the key is down here. The one on the left comes from an orange object in light, oriented this way, viewed through some purplish medium. Whereas the one on the right comes from a yellow object in shadow, or in exactly the opposite direction, viewed through a different medium. Completely different sources giving rise to the exact same information. So those two areas of the screen are physically the same, but they have completely different meanings. And it's those meanings that you're seeing. So how does the brain make sense of meaningless information? Everything that it receives is meaningless. How does it make sense of it? And what I want to do is show you how we do it using these toys. The first step is that the brain finds relationships. It finds relationships, information, and then I'll show the next step. But I need a volunteer. In fact, I have a volunteer, which is Peter. Right? He just found out about this. He was going to go hide somewhere, but now he has to come out. You don't need a microphone. So thank you very much. He has no idea what's going to happen. We're going to do a little experiment. It's not very invasive. All right? Now, he used to play the keyboard, so he should be really good at this. He should be very good with his hands, right? So we're going to find out. We got permission to throw a ball at this screen, so if it puts a hole in it, he has to pay for it as well. So, right? So, you're left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay, very good. So we're going to do a little experiment, and all you have to do is hit that dot. Now, it might seem easier than it is, because I was trying it this morning, and it was a bit difficult. So all you have underhand, so we don't ruin the screen, you have to just hit that dot, okay? Okay, I only have 18 minutes. Okay, getting closer, getting closer. Okay, a couple more. He's throwing it straight, so we're getting there. Right? Okay, one more, because it's important that he's throwing it straight. That he hits the dot isn't as important. Okay, so now, good, not yet. He's going to put on these beautiful glasses, that I stole from my mentor, Dale Purvis, and just turn around so they can see how beautiful you are. Right? So now let's move a little bit closer. Now all he has to do is hit the dot, okay? Which is up there. And I'll tell you what's happening. He's wearing prisms, okay? As far as his brain is concerned, the whole world has been shifted about 20 degrees to the right, which is why he's throwing it to the right. But he's going to learn. Eventually. It's happening because what we do is we get feedback from our experiences and we adapt to that feedback and we come to see the world in a new way, right? Some of us sooner than others. Now we're going. Oh, down to 11 minutes. Okay, come on. No, you gotta leave them on. Okay, getting there, perfect. Very good. Now he's starting to throw it center. Now you can see that his body is actually throwing the ball differently. That's because the relationship between our mind and body is not so distinct. Keep going. Throw it more to the left. There you go. Keep going. We want him to learn this. Keep going. Very good. Keep going. You see, now he's throwing it to the middle, okay? He's learning. He's doing what I call redefining normality, right? Okay, very good. Now, we're going to take the glasses off. We're all agreed he's throwing it straight. Now go ahead, hit the dot. Very good. What's happening? He's throwing it left. Why? Because his brain has come to see the world in a new way. It doesn't know the glasses are off. All right? One more, so we know you're back to normal. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. It's over there somewhere. It's my kid's ball. I have to get it later. Okay, so puts the glasses on. He throws it to the right. Right? But eventually, through experience, he comes to see the world in a new way, hits the target. When I first did this, the very first time, Medical Society, I brought someone up on stage. They took the ball, hit the dot. Put the glasses on, hit the dot. Never missed. Took the glasses off, hit the dot. Never missed. Turns out he was a physicist that works with prisms every single day. Right? So it completely made my point, but it completely destroyed the demonstration. So he takes the glasses off, and now he throws it to the left, okay? And eventually we'll go back to normal, right? So that's the first thing that the brain does. It finds relationships in the world through interaction, through engagement. But that's not the only step. The next step is to then associate a meaning with those relationships, okay? And the argument is it's that meaning that we see. Now, we're familiar with this in, of course, language. So I want 1,000 people to see if you can do this. Brilliant. Now, if you're Portuguese, right? What are you reading? There are no words there. That literally says, what at our reading, all right? But you're all reading the same thing. Why? Because the history of your experience, it would have been useful to put an H between that W and A. And so you do so again. You don't put a letter beyond the T because in your past experience it would have been useful. And yet none of you said, what are you dreaming? Just as possible. Why? Because I had primed you to be reading. So what you read is, what are you reading? Right? We always are seeing meaning. That's all we ever see. And what's true for language is also true for the simplest thing that the brain does, seeing light. So when we see these two dots, we put them in different surrounds. We change their perception of them. The one in the lighter surround looks darker than the one in the dark surround. Why? It's because what you're seeing is the meaning of the light. So to give you an example, we have those same two illusions repeated here, two tiles, one in a dark surround, one in a light surround. the same illusion on the right as on the left, okay? The one in the dark surround looks slightly lighter than the one in the light surround. What I'm going to do now is change their meaning, but I'm not going to change what happens in those squares at all, and see what happens to your perception. Are the illusions just as strong on the left and the right? No. The one on the left, now you see a white and a black tile. The one on the right, you see two tiles that are nearly exactly the same. Why? Because the one on the left, the light tile, if it were actually in shadow, there would be less light hitting it. If less light is hitting it, but it's reflecting the same amount of light to your eye as the one in light, it must be more reflective. So you see it as being lighter. Whereas the information on the right says those two tiles are the same. They're under the same light on different backgrounds. They must be equally reflective, so you see them as being the same. What you're seeing is the meaning of the information, the meaning of the relationships, not the information itself. So we can put all these things together and create incredibly strong illusions. So you might be surprised to know that the dark tile, the brown tile at the top, is exactly the same as the orange tile at the side. Those two tiles are physically the same. If I remove the context, change their meaning, you can see they're exactly the same. That's your physical reality, and that's your perceptual reality. You have 4 gray tiles on the left and 7 gray tiles on the right. Agreed? They're all gray. Okay? I'm not going to change those tiles at all. I'm just going to change their meaning. Now, I want you to keep your eye on the front one here, okay? And just see what happens to your perception of that gray tile. What color is it now? Blue? You see 4 blue tiles on the left and 7 yellow tiles on the right? They're all gray. That's your physical reality, and that's your perceptual reality. The blue tiles are exactly the same as the yellow tiles. These two surfaces are the same. The surface on the top is exactly the same as the surface underneath. If I create a mask so you could look through them, that's the physical reality of those surfaces. You see 4 angles? They all look different subtenses. Those are all 90-degree angles. Okay? These 2 tables are the same. It's true. The height of the green table is exactly the width of the red table, and the width of the green table is exactly the height of the red table. The red table is the green table on its side. The only difference is the angles at the corners. Does anyone see anything in this blob of white? Can anyone make out any meaning, any information? What if I add... He saw this earlier, this doesn't count. But it did take him a while, to be fair. Okay, so can anyone see anything? Now, this is a very important word, okay? So I'm going to add something over top. And I'm not going to change anything in the white at all. I'm just going to add something to the top. What do you see? The word bell. Yes? Now, if I remove the orange squares, can you still read the word bell? It was always there. It always is. Okay? Now, I want to show you something which is not only that can show you just how you look at something can change the way you see it. So I'm not even going to change the context. I'm just going to change the way you look at something. So here I'm going to show you 2 ways you can see the next image. You can either see the next image as a cross going back and forth, or 2 bars going up and down. Okay? That's called pattern motion on your right and component motion on your left in psychophysics. Now here, you probably all see an X going back and forth. Yes, agreed? All right? But I want you to look at it in a different way. I want you to keep your eye on the junction between the green bar and the purple background, and just follow that. And at some point, the 2 bars will dissociate. They'll go up and down against each other. Yes? You get that? Put your arm up if you got that, so I know. Okay? most of you. Now, keep your eyes where the two bars meet. Suddenly you see an X going back and forth. Focus where the bar and the green background meet, and you'll see the two bars going up and down. Depending on what you look at, you'll see exactly opposite perceptions. In fact, I can get you to look at the white circle and attend to those different regions, and you'll see something exactly opposite. So, do I have time for this? I've never done this in front of an audience, so I thought 1,000 people would be a good way to start. Can you help me with this?
Sure.
I might run out of time, but okay. This is a toy. And first, I have to put on my very special head. Okay. Can you see anything, sir?
Not a thing.
Okay, so you stand there. Now we should all leave. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to put this on. And again, remember, I've never done this in front of a group of people.
Neither have I.
And you never will again. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how. Now this is an incredibly intelligent person who thinks about perception all the time. Okay? Now we're going to do a little game where one half of you is going to clap, and he's going to point to which half of the audience is clapping, either this half or that half. Very simple, right? It's got to be right or left. Okay? Now, let's see if I can get this on. Is that on nice and snugly?
Very snugly.
Okay. Now, your task is to point which side of the audience is clapping. Okay? So where am I right now?
You are... Do it again. You're behind me.
I want...
Both sides.
Both sides. Okay. We'll do it again, but so you can see. That half. That half.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great.
Oh, okay. I'm now over time. Okay, so this is called an ear switcher. Okay? It means the sound that comes over here enters this ear, and the sound that comes over here enters that ear. Okay? At this level, because of our experience, we can't help, what did I put my clicker? We can't help but perceive things according to our past experiences. In that sense, Richie's behaving like this frog. Right? Do you have the sound? It gets a stimulus, and it behaves according to its past experience of what that means. And sometimes when things don't go the way we expect, right? We don't like that, right? But us humans, being human, we can do something else that frog can't do. We can do what I call seeing yourself see. We can have an awareness. We can become perceivers of ourselves. When you look at that illusion, you're experiencing two realities at the same time. One you see and one you know. You see those two tiles as being different, but you also know that they are the same. You're literally seeing yourself see. And it's through that process of seeing yourself see, of becoming an observer of yourself, of becoming aware, that enables us to do amazing things, enables us to be human, right? And the argument here is that if our perceptions of the world are grounded in our history, then what we do now affects how we will see things in the future. So the creation of all new perceptions begins in the same way, with a question, with a step into uncertainty. Okay? And within that step to uncertainty, suddenly we have things like choice. And with choice, we can actually be creative. And something even more fundamental is we have the ability for compassion. Because this is human nature. This is what it is to be human. And it's only by accepting our own human nature that we can accept the human nature of others. Okay? So things to remember, a couple of thoughts. The brain continually redefines normality. That's what it does. That's what it evolved to do. Right? Because we are defined by our ecology. We're not defined by the stuff that makes us up. We're not defined by our DNA. We're defined by our history of interactions, the meaning of relationships. Okay? And you have two options. Either there are no illusions, or everything is one. Okay? And given that, we're pretty much all delusional. So you might as well choose your delusion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beau. Our next speaker will be V.S. Ramachandran from UC San Diego. Rama.
Thank you. Well, I'm delighted and honored to be here. It's going to be a tough act to follow. It's like following a rock star. Thank you, Richie, for inviting me to this amazing event, this meeting. And I'd like to talk about the brain and its functions, obviously. And it's almost a cliche to say that the human brain is the most complexly organized form of matter in the known universe, at least known to us, humans. And it's made up of neurons, made up of 100 billion neurons or nerve cells, and cells being the structural units of the nervous system. And each cell makes about 1,000 to 10,000 contacts with other neurons. Points of contact are called synapses. Each point can be on or off, can be inhibitory, can be excitatory. Based on this, it's been calculated that the number of possible brain states, permutations and combinations of brain activity, exceeds the number of elementary particles in the known universe. This gives you some idea of the complexity one is faced with in trying to understand the brain. Many ways of studying the brain. One is to put electrodes in the brain and eavesdrop on the activity of nerve cells, as you know. Another way is to do brain imaging, which is all the rage these days, makes headlines in newspapers. Third method, the one we use, is called behavioral neurology. That is when there's a small damage to a tiny part of the brain. What you get very often is not an across-the-board blunting of all cognitive abilities and sensibilities, but often a highly selective loss of one specific function, other functions being intact. So either there can be a damage, or there can be a genetic change, or sometimes there's a drastic change in the environment or in the body. This can also rewire the brain in a dramatic manner, as we shall see. I'm going to concentrate on body-brain interactions and how the sensory input can change the organization of your brain radically. So let's talk about phantom limb, which you all know about. It's a schematic description. So when an arm or a leg is lost in a car accident or due to gangrene and the surgeon amputates it, you continue to vividly feel the presence of that arm. This is called a phantom arm. Am I speaking too fast? Right? I'm audible at the back. Thank you. Okay, so it's a phantom limb or a phantom leg or a phantom arm. You can get a phantom almost in any part of the body. Now, the amazing thing is people can move their phantoms. The patient will say, I can reach out and grab a cup, doctor. I can pat my little brother on the shoulder. I can slap you. I can shake hands with you, all with my phantom. Patient is not delusional. He knows that he doesn't have an arm, but it's a vivid, perceptual, sensory illusion. Now, how can you move a phantom limb? Sounds like an oxymoron. Okay? Well, it turns out that in all of us, let's take normals. When I send a command to my arm to move, the commands originate in the frontal lobes, in the prefrontal cortex, and it goes to the motor cortex, premotor and motor cortex in the front of this great cleft here called the central sulcus. There's a motor cortex there. The messages go down the spinal cord and orchestrate a precise sequence of muscle movements so I can reach out and grab a cup or I can reach out and shake your hand, right? Now these movements occur in normal people. So when I'm standing here and I'm doing that, my frontal lobe sending messages down the spinal cord, down the axons of my arm, controlling the sequence of muscle twitches to reach and grab something. Now, when I do that, at the same time, a CC, a copy of that command, is sent to the body image center in the parietal lobe, especially on the right side, which is not visible here. And the parietal lobe also receives, it's strategically located. It's here, strategically located between vision, touch, joint, muscle sense, vestibular sense, when you shake your head, organs in your ear send messages, and from muscle and joint, and from vision. All up from vision, muscle and joint, hearing, vestibular sense, to construct a very vivid image of your own body. It's called the body image, so the body moving through space and time. Now, the amazing thing is when the arm is removed, the commands continue to get sent because the brain doesn't know the arm is gone. Continue to get sent and continue to get monitored, just like Facebook or email or something like that. CC on an email, it continues to get monitored. It's also getting feedback from vision, well, not from vision, feedback from the muscles, and then that also confirms that your arm is moving. Now, when the arm is amputated, there's no feedback from the muscles, there's no feedback from vision, but the monitoring of the commands continues to take place, and that's experienced as phantom movements of the phantom limb. Okay? Now, oops. What's going on here? Phantom slide. Can somebody assist me here, or? Okay, we'll have to do. Oh, okay, there you go. Okay, so now that's true of most patients. So this image is constructed in the right parietal lobe using many sensory systems. We know this because when the right parietal lobe is damaged, you get an extraordinary syndrome called denial of paralysis, denial of the arm itself. The patient will be perfectly lucid, can play chess with you, well, not play chess, but discuss politics with you and answer your questions, do mental arithmetic and all of that. But he's sitting there in front of you and he'll say, I saw a woman not long ago in India and she said, Doctor, this arm, what is this arm doing in my bed? It's not my arm, it belongs to my mother. And I said, Mrs. D, can you move your arm? She said, of course I can move it. Can you see it moving? Yes, I can see it moving. Okay. Whose arm is it? It's my mother's arm. This is a perfectly lucid, normal, intelligent woman telling me that a paralyzed left arm, paralyzed as a result of stroke, damage to the right parietal, saying that her left arm belongs to her mother. So I said, where is your mother? Oh, where's my mother? Oh, she's hiding under the table, doctor. Okay. Can you move your left arm? Yes, I can move it. Okay, show me that you can move it. Touch your nose with your left arm. She does this. So somebody in her knows that that is her left arm, that it is not moving, it's paralyzed. That's why she does that. So it's as though there are two Mrs. BMs. Her name is Mrs. BM. One who knows she's paralyzed, one who knows that she isn't. So this harks back to multiple layers of belief and reality. So the body image is constructed in the right parietal. Now I told you people can move their phantom limb, but some of them, a subset of them, about 25% of them, the arm is paralyzed. The phantom arm is paralyzed. The guy will say, I've had this phantom for 5 years, I've had it for 10 years, I've had it for a year, and I can't move it. I'm trying to move it, it won't budge an inch. It's fixed in an awkward, painful position. It's like this, doctor. And you'll mimic it with the other arm, show you it's an awkward, painful position, the phantom. So my fingernails are digging into the palm, digging into the wrist, and I can't move it. It's excruciatingly painful. I wish I could move it. And he'll try to move it, and he'll start sweating, producing autonomic changes. Now, why does this happen? We don't know. I'll get back to that later in the talk. But we said, what if we give him artificial visual feedback that the phantom, which is fixed and paralyzed, can move again freely? Would that relieve the pain? So I said, how do you do this? He said, he doesn't have an arm. How do you give him the visual illusion that the phantom is moving? So we said, let's take the signals from the brain, the motor command signals, attach it to a virtual reality system, give him the visual illusion that the phantom is moving again. But to set this up, I called my colleagues at Caltech, and they said it would cost you about $500,000. I said, that'll wipe out all my grants. And I said, how do you do this? Well, I hit on a technique for doing it for $2. You simply use a mirror. What you do is you put your phantom on the left side of the mirror. So the mirror is in front of me, poised vertically, propped up vertically. Phantom is on the left side of the mirror. So see my left side is a phantom. The right hand is placed on the right side, and I look into the right side of the mirror. What do I see? I see the phantom resurrected. And then I move my right hand and send commands to both hands to clap or conduct an orchestra or wave goodbye, some symmetrical movements with both hands while looking in the mirror. I'm going to get the visual illusion that my phantom is obeying my command for the first time in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. What happens then? I have my first patient doing this, and I said, I want you to conduct an orchestra while looking in the mirror to see your reflection of your right hand moving. And then move both hands. He said, well, I can't move my left hand, you know that. been paralyzed for 5 years. I wish I could move it. Might relieve the pain. I said, look, try anyway. He said, okay. He thought it was an eccentric request. He said, okay, I'll try it. And he does it. He said, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. My phantom is moving again for the first time in 9 years. And it feels so good. It animates my phantom, and the pain goes away. And I said, close your hand. Close your eyes, Close your eyes. Now try it again. Oh, it's stuck completely. I know you wanted to move, but it's stuck. It doesn't move, and it's painful. Open your eyes. Oh my God, it's moving again. Now if he then throws away the mirror and walks around, the phantom is stuck and it's painful, so it doesn't work. So I said, let's use the mirror repeatedly for a week. And after a week of repeated use, the phantom could be moved spontaneously without a mirror, and the pain gets relieved. Sometimes for months, and then he needs a refill after a few months. Now this has now been tested in systematic clinical trials. This is the New England Journal of Medicine on about 20 patients, subsequently on 50 patients. And sure enough, with the mirror, there's a dramatic improvement, reduction in pain from about 30% down to about 5% on a scale of 100. On a scale of 70. With a covered mirror, the pain actually goes up. That's a placebo. Mental visualization, the pain goes down slightly, but not significantly. When you do a reversal, you put the control groups in the mirror, their pain also reduces. It's about as good as it gets in clinical trials. So now it's used in Haiti, it's used in Cambodia. Mirror procedure used by thousands of patients all over the world. Anybody can afford it. It's about $2. Thank you. Now, that's about phantom limbs. Oops, I'm running out of time. It's about phantom limbs. Now, there's another even more extraordinary disorder. Now, I said, can you use a mirror to treat real pain in a real arm? I mean, treating phantom pain is surprising in itself, but what about a real pain in a real arm, a chronic pain? So I hit on, in 1996, I proposed there's a disorder called reflex sympathetic dystrophy, or complex regional pain syndrome type 2, which means we don't know what it is. It's just medical jargon, okay? What happens is when you have a small hairline fracture in your metacarpal bone or a nail bed infection, the finger becomes painful, becomes swollen, becomes worn, and then after a few weeks, the fracture heals, the pain subsides, the warmth goes away, the wound heals, in other words, the fracture heals. But in some patients, it's not that rare, maybe in 5% of patients, the pain does not heal, the fracture does not heal. The finger becomes more swollen, more inflamed, and the inflammation and the swelling spreads into the entire hand, spreads into the entire arm. The whole arm gets swollen, the whole arm gets completely paralyzed, and excruciatingly painful, and it lasts a lifetime, lasts for decades, sometimes for an entire life. This is called reflex sympathetic dystrophy, complex regional pain syndrome. Nobody knows what causes it. Very few physicians have heard of it, but it's not rare. In fact, you see it, another variant of it, in about 10% of stroke patients. 10% of stroke patients have these peculiar pains nobody understands. So we said maybe what's going on is the initial days of fracture, the patient attempted to move the hand, there was excruciating pain. The hand was immobilized. It's a reflex immobilization to protect the hand from further injury. So it has an evolutionary agenda. But what happens is normally when the fracture heals, the pain goes away. But here, every time he attempts it, the motor command to move the pain is associated with an excruciating pain sensation. So the brain learns to associate the command with pain. So we call it learned pain. So move, pain, move, and then the guy is stuck with this learned pain for life. Now, why there's inflammation and swelling is another fascinating question. It's a striking example of mind-body interactions. Right? Now, we said, what if you put a mirror? And then you look inside the mirror and move the normal hand simultaneously with sending commands to the abnormal hand, just as you do with phantom limbs. The brain is going to get a signal. Look, the paralyzed, immobilized, painful arm is moving with impunity. There's no pain. Because, of course, you're not really moving it. It's paralyzed. But it's moving fine, and it's painless. So the brain unlearns the learned pain. Then what happens is, we didn't try it, we suggested it, but a few years later, Candy McCabe tried this experiment. And lo and behold, on the table, the paralyzed hand, which has been paralyzed for 5 years or 10 years, starts moving. And the pain goes away, and the swelling starts subsiding. Okay? That's the most powerful example of mind-body interactions I've ever seen. And over a period of weeks, with repeated use of the mirror for 1 hour a day, it becomes permanent. The swelling goes away completely. The entire arm starts moving. The entire swelling goes away. The skin temperature changes, and you can't fake that. You can't fake your fingers. Now, it's very important. Pain can be a result of placebo. And of course, these people have now done it with, I don't have a slide, controlled trials on 50 patients with 20 patients with placebo, 20 patients with procedure, another 10 patients with a different kind of placebo, and then do a crossover and show this is a real effect. So it's not a placebo effect. We're talking about huge changes in pain with the placebo control, done double blind, right? But even more striking is the fact that the temperature of the hand changes. You can't fake that. And the swelling goes away, you can't fake that. Now it's even more interesting when you put the mirror, all of these start reversing in a matter of weeks. The swelling goes away, the pain goes away, the motility comes back. And even more surprising, if you go to the right parietal, there are changes in the brain, in the right parietal. You can do brain imaging and show there are changes in the brain. So, and also with the mere presence of visual feedback, the swelling, pain, and paralysis all disappear. And stay disappeared for months after follow-up. So this suggests that the old model of brain function, which we learned from MIT, is completely wrong. And that is, the brain is composed of all these autonomous modules. Each module is highly specialized for one specific function, right? And it's hardwired in early infancy or even in the fetus and cannot be changed in the adult. Hence the notorious lack of recovery of function in neurology from brain damage. So this is what we were all taught. So this is the serial hierarchical bucket brigade model of brain function. Each module computes something, sends it to the next module higher up, makes some other aspect of the information explicit, sends it to the next area, and so on and so forth. There's very little interaction between the modules. What I'm saying is all that is nonsense. What's going on in the real brain, it's an extraordinarily dynamic system, and it's immersed in the environment in a state of constant dynamic equilibrium with the environment, changing connections all the time in the adult brain in response to changing environmental challenges and needs. And it's interacting with the skin surface, not just with the environment, but with the skin. The skin surface is modifying the brain. And especially surprising is in these patients with RSD, they start denying the arm. In other words, they get the same syndrome as you get with the right parietal damage, the neglect and the denial syndrome. They start disowning the arm, say, a doctor doesn't feel like it belongs to me. And they have neglect, tendency to ignore the left side of the world, left side of the body, which happens in the right parietal disease. So think about what this implies. This little tiny little hairline fracture is affecting the brain and producing something that a stroke normally produces. Stroke in the brain, damaging right parietal, produces denial of paralysis, denial of arm ownership. This is occurring with damage to the finger, not to the brain. Running out of time. Third thing I want to tell you about, even more surprising, okay, I keep saying that. Again, going back to phantom limb. Okay, so let's say you have a phantom limb, your arm has been amputated. I have an intact limb. You watch me, you watch my intact limb. She has a phantom limb and she watches my intact limb. And I simply scratch my intact limb and you watch. Guess what happens? You feel the scratch in your phantom limb. Now just think about it. The phantom limbs have been known for 200, 300 years. Nobody observed this. That if a phantom limb patient watches another person being touched in the same part, he feels it in his phantom limb. Why would this happen? The answer comes from a cluster of neurons called mirror neurons, which were discovered by Giacomo Rizzolatti in Parma in Italy. And other people have confirmed it since then. It's discovered in monkeys, but you see it in humans too. I'll tell you about one class of mirror neurons. Okay. So let's go to the back of the brain. That vertical strip of cortex is called the somatosensory cortex, and there's another strip behind it which represent your touch, different parts of your skin and muscles being touched. Depending on where you touch, you get corresponding activity in different parts of the somatosensory strip. So there's a complete map of the left side of the body and the right side of the brain. Now it turns out these cells normally respond to me being touched or you being touched, okay? If I touch your left side of the body, your right hemisphere fires, neurons fire. The extraordinary thing Rizzolatti observed is if your right, let me switch here, it's easier. If somebody touches my left hand, the somatosensory cortex fires. But if I watch your left hand being touched, the cells here fire. That's astonishing. They're called mirror neurons. What's going on is the brain, the neuron is saying, effectively, it's doing a virtual reality simulation of your sensory systems. It's saying, look, buddy, the same thing is happening now as would happen if you were touched, when you're watching her being touched. So therefore, empathize with her touch, right? You are being touched. You're being touched the same way, and you should feel the same thing that would happen if you yourself were being touched. They're called mirror neurons. But however, you don't actually, when somebody touches you and I watch, I'll be done in 2 minutes. If somebody touches you and I watch, I don't literally feel the touch sensation in my hand. If somebody pokes you with a needle, I empathize, but I don't say, ouch, withdraw my hand. Why not? The same neurons are firing. Same neurons fire if I'm poked with a needle as when I watch you poke with a needle. But I empathize, but I don't literally feel it. The reason is that my skin is coming back, my own skin signals are going back to my brain and saying, look, I know these neurons are saying ouch, but there's nothing happening in your skin, so shut up. Okay? So it's sending a null signal to my brain, partially vetoing the output of the mirror neuron system and saying don't experience pain. Empathize by all means, but don't literally experience it. Now what happens if somebody removes my arm is that null signal goes away and I watch you being poked with a needle, I feel the sensation in my hand. And I feel the pain and I feel the touch. And I do say ouch and withdraw my phantom. Okay? So the extraordinary implication of this is my brain is hooked up to your brain directly. The only thing that separates your qualia, your sensory experience from mine, is my bloody skin. I peel off my skin, I start literally experiencing your sensations. So this harks back to Eastern mysticism in philosophy. There's no fundamental distinction between your mind and my mind other than the skin, sending veto signals. Remove the skin and I start blending into you. It's like, in other words, it's the world's first internet of virtual reality. So I call these neurons Gandhi neurons. Now I'll conclude with one final remark. This woman who I showed this on, now I've shown this on a number of people. This woman I showed this on went home and she phoned me the next day and she said, Dr. Ramachandran, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? What's going on? Oh my God, you're not going to believe it. I said, what? I have this excruciating pain in my phantom finger, my phantom thumb. And there's nothing I could do about it. I haven't tried your mirror yet, but I have nothing I could do about it. Now I ask my husband to massage his thumb while I watch. And I get this phantom massage in my thumb that relieves the phantom pain. Okay? We haven't tried this in the clinic yet on double-blind controls, but we're planning to. Thank you very much.
What a wonderful way to begin this morning. Thank you both so much for extraordinary presentations. So we have a few minutes to just pursue a few of the ideas that each of you considered in your presentations. And Beau, I'd like to begin with a question for you. And that is, you so beautifully illustrated the tricks that our visual system plays and the fact that what we perceive is not always what's out there. In fact, it rarely is, if ever.
It never is.
And so to what extent, you showed the beautiful demonstration, and I was a very compliant subject, with sound. To what extent do you hold this to be a more generic model for other sensory modalities, for other types, more complex types of perception? If you can just say a little bit about the extent to which these principles that you so beautifully illustrated in the visual system generalize to other domains.
One of the reasons for doing it in color is because, again, that's the simplest thing that the brain does. So whatever is happening there has to be true all the way up. And the reason why it has to be true in all of our senses, in fact, all of our perceptions, whether those be the perceptions of emotion right the way down to color, is because the brain is presented always with uncertainty. And all the sensory modalities deal with uncertainty. The auditory system, the somatosensory system, everything is dealing with uncertainty because we have no direct access to the physical world other than through the senses that fall onto our receptors. That goes back to Berkeley. And so because of that, in all of our sensory modalities, the brain can only rely on another kind of information, which is experience. So what we hear, what we feel, what we see is always a meaning grounded in history. So what's true for color is true for everything.
And at those moments where we become aware of that uncertainty, do we have a choice? Can you say more about that? Do we have a choice in terms of how we can perceive?
When it comes to things like color, probably not. But when it comes to higher level things, of course we do. And that was one of the points I wanted to make at the end, which is that by putting yourself in a position of being an observer of yourself, by becoming aware, and awareness is fundamental to this, by becoming aware of that connection between the past, the present, and the future, only then can you become an active participant in the process of making sense.
And can you tell us something more about, you used the word compassion at the end of your presentation. How should we think about the relation between compassion and perception?
The relationship between compassion and perception, the idea is that if everything I see is grounded in my history and my experience, but of course I'm also not excluding the experience of a species, but if everything I see, literally the colors I see, are grounded in my history, those are my meanings. But it means that that creates a possibility for having compassion and sensitivity to the way you see, because that's grounded in your history. So while we might have different meanings, we can argue about the relevance of that for our own lives, it means they're both grounded in the same place, which is our own individual experiences. Therein creates the possibility for empathy and for compassion.
So it's the appreciation of...
It's that awareness.
The awareness of
of where it's coming from.
And that each of us that it's coming from the same place in each of us, and from that, the experience of compassion would emerge.
Yes. And
if I might pitch in.
Please.
Oops. My microphone is not on, I think.
yeah.
It is on?
Yeah.
Okay. With mirror neuron system, where there's empathy involved. So for example, if, as I said, if you're hurt and somebody pokes you with a needle, then I can say verbally, oh, she's being poked and she's experiencing pain. Or, because of the mirror neuron system, I quote unquote literally experience your pain. My brain is doing a virtual reality simulation, saying she's experiencing the same thing as I would experience if my pain neurons are activated. So I have a genuine empathy for your pain. That's required for sympathy and compassion. I can't have compassion for pain unless I've experienced pain for myself. That would be another link there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you. Beau, I also, there's a question that came in from the audience for you. And the question is, does perception change as we develop from children to adulthood?
Yes.
Can you say something about that?
It does change. I mean, there's a tremendous literature on that. But in fact, last week we have some results on this. And we do now studies looking at the interpersonal differences between people, which require thousands of subjects. And we've discovered recently that children see illusions very differently than adults. And in fact, people in a higher status also perceive illusions differently than people in lower status. And people in the East perceive illusions differently than people in the West. But in the case of children, what's interesting is that children and adults see the basic illusion the same, the simultaneous, what's called the simultaneous brightness contrast, those two targets in light and dark surrounds. But when you start adding those pictorial cues, like that cube, children see the illusion much stronger than adults. And the question is why? We don't know. But what we're thinking is that children are much more immersed in that image. It's as if they're seeing it for real, much more than adults are. And so if those tiles are literally under different lighting conditions, they must be different. So the children are actually seeing it as if they're really there.
That's why the magicians find it hard to trick children.
Yeah. Or, yes, because, well, it's a question actually. It's as if virtual reality will work much better with children than it will on adults. They're much more susceptible to suggestion. And what's interesting is children behave much more like people who are on a spectrum of power. People on lower power also see that same illusion as being stronger, as if they're much more suggestible. So there's one example.
Are children able to more easily or less easily shift perspective once...
Children are much more easy to shift perspective. Children are much more open to possibility. Adults become much more narrow in possibility. And in fact, illusions are much less interesting to children than they are to adults, because they're quite happy for mutually exclusive things to exist simultaneously. It's the adults who say, no, that's not possible. And the children say, yeah, that's fine, I can deal with that. So yes.
So the magician example would be a counter example.
It'd be a counter example. So it can't be right. How dare you?
Rama, I wonder if we can now turn to some of the really exciting things you described. And I love the way you talk about the influence in parts of our body and the examples you gave of changes in somatic processes, things below the neck, like in swelling, in inflammation. And I wonder if you can just help all of us understand a little bit more about how the mind and the brain actually can infiltrate, if you will, down to the level of the skin. What's going on there? What do we know about that?
That's a fascinating question. I mean, it seems to me there's a lot of talk about mind-body medicine, it's especially here in California. But it's one thing to talk about it in an airy-fairy way and actually do experiments to show how profound these influences are. And RSD, or complex regional pain syndrome, is one of the most striking examples I know of, as we just saw. And well, to me, it's not any more mysterious, if you think about it, than the fact that I can do this. I mean, it's a cascade of transmitters and ions, and sodium and potassium ions, and neurotransmitters, acetylcholine and norepinephrine and all of that, wiggling my muscle. Here you're doing it with skin blood vessels and sweat glands, and in fact you get bone changes too. The bone cells atrophying in RSD. So it is, on the one hand, very surprising. On the other hand, it's not that surprising if you know about the physiology and anatomy of the body. But what's amazing is the fact that the visual input can come in and affect it. And also equally amazing is the fact that the slight damage to the metacarpal bone can change the brain organization. That we don't know what the pathways are. Can change the organization of the brain. Produce the same effect as a stroke damaging the parietal lobe can be done by damaging your metacarpal bone. This shows you how interactive it is. So the brain is not only interacting profoundly with the body and the skin and the muscle and the guts, and it's interacting with the environment through vision. It's also interacting with other brains. So your brain is hooked up with other brains through mirror neurons. It's hooked up to your skin. So of course, it's hooked up to the environment. And it's also different modules that are interacting. It's hooked up to other modules. So it's an extraordinarily dynamic, plastic system, very different from the conventional picture of the brain. So in addition to the clinical implications, which are important, also very important theoretical implications regarding our picture of brain function.
Well, yeah, I think you've painted an extraordinary image for us of the amazing range of mind-brain-body interaction. And many of these observations, we still are still in search of a mechanism. We don't fully understand scientifically how those changes occur. But the other thing that I think
we don't understand in detail.
In detail. But the other thing that I think is so important is that these connections are bidirectional.
Right, absolutely.
So it's not just the brain sending signals to the body, but as you illustrated, it's specific damage to parts of the body that can actually change the plasticity of certain parts of the brain.
Yes.
So it goes in both directions.
Exactly. That's
right. I wanted to move on and ask a little bit about mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are sort of in the culture these days. People are talking about them and using them to explain all kinds of things.
And they don't explain everything.
So maybe say a little bit about what they don't explain.
That's a tough question.
They've been implicated in all kinds of human empathy and compassion, the understanding of relationships. Give us some sense of proper boundaries for thinking about where are mirror neurons found in the brain, first of all. Let's start there.
Okay. They were discovered actually in the frontal lobes, in the prefrontal areas of the brain, sort of up here and up here. And these areas of the brain normally initiate motor commands. So those neurons send messages from the premotor to motor cortex, orchestrating the precise sequence of muscle twitches, allowing you to go and grab the pen, let's say. That's where you get the motor, they're called motor command neurons, as you know. They're well known, they were discovered 50 years ago by Vernon Mountcastle at Hopkins. What Rizzolatti found was a subset of these neurons. Remember, I'm talking about mirror motor neurons, not mirror sensory neurons now. It's what I talked about in my lecture.
And maybe just explain for the audience how Rizzolatti did this, because these were studies done in monkeys.
In monkeys, exactly. So you get motor command neurons in the monkey in the frontal lobe. Again, about 20% of these neurons will fire not only when the monkey reaches out and grabs a peanut, but when the monkey watches another monkey or indeed another person reaching out and grabbing a peanut. So they call monkey see, monkey do neurons. Again, extraordinarily important. I jumped off my seat when I heard about this, Rizalati talking about this about 10 years ago. What it's implying is the monkey's brain is doing a virtual reality simulation of the other monkey's brain. It's saying, in fact, the same neuron is firing as would fire if I were to reach out and grab the peanut. Therefore, that monkey is intending to reach out and grab that peanut. Now, you may think it's some kind of trivial ability, but it's actually extraordinarily important for things like imitation learning. Much of the learning we do, at least in the old days, now we have books and things to read, but in the old days, when hominids were evolving, was done through imitation. So in imitation, you think of something trivial, like mocking somebody, right? But in fact, it's fundamental may have played a fundamental role in the emergence of culture and civilization. Because think about a polar bear, to evolve a fur coat, it took a few 100,000 years of painful, laborious natural selection. Whereas a human child watching its mother slay let's say a mother, especially smart mother, found that you can slay a polar bear, discovered this act quite by accident, skin it and put it on itself, and protect itself. It didn't have to wait 100,000 years to evolve a fur coat. Now a child watching the mother with a rich mirror neuron system can put itself in the mother's shoes and learn how to do it in 1 or 2 trials. So suddenly what happens is evolution becomes Lamarckian instead of Darwinian. And it spreads like wildfire horizontally across peers and vertically across generations. And that's the dawn of what we call culture. Right? Culture. So you invent fire, you discover fire, you invent shelter, you have to stone tool. All of these are passed down from generation to generation thanks to mirror neurons. So I don't think they're being exaggerated. I think they're being played down, actually.
And it's it really is, I think, important to understand that they're playing such an important role, even though they comprise only a relatively small percentage of the neuronal population in the regions in which they're found. Is that right?
Well, not that small. In the motor regions, it's about 20%.
20%. Okay.
Sensory regions, about 10%.
Yeah. So.
And there may be mirror neurons for pain in the anterior cingulate. So it is a distributed system. It's not just one tiny. Most of the antipathy towards them is sort of anti-reductionist, like neuron envy.
Well, there's a. Well, talking about neuron envy, there is a question from the audience about mirror neurons, which is a little unusual, but since we're talking about it, I thought I'd bring this up. So the person from the audience asked, can mirror neurons explain the transmission that occurs between people when they meditate together? An example of, I think, interest in the culture in how broad the mirror neuron concept should be applied. What are your thoughts about that, Ram?
No. Sorry, I'm being dogmatic. I think it could be that meditation involves subtle changes in expression. So the important thing about mirror neurons is there's nothing psychic or spooky going on. You're taking the visual input and transforming it into somatosensory sensations, right? And movements. So when you meditate together, short of telepathy or something like that, you can't synchronize the meditation. But you can look at subtle cues like posture and facial expression and the beatific expression and all of that. That could transmit through mirror neuron systems. These aspects of mirror neuron function, these emotional aspects, have not been adequately studied. Yeah. For example, the Dalai Lama's colleague, I'm blocking his name, Lama, whatever his name is, came in, we had lunch together a few weeks ago. As soon as he entered the room, I felt totally happy and immersed in something much bigger than myself. Mm-hmm. This sounds like mumbo jumbo, but in fact, I felt compassion, I felt empathy, I felt like it doesn't matter, you know, I feel happy, I feel enlightened, all of that, just looking at his expression. Has that ever happened to you? It's quite extraordinary. not looking at me, but
I'm getting it right now.
I hope you're all getting that. Well, it is, I think you're certainly touching upon something that many people have reported, and I think that it's certainly something which is important for us as scientists to take seriously, these kinds of reports, and to try to make sense of them. There's another question which came through from a member of the audience concerning the disorder that you described, the RSD syndrome. And the questioner is asking about whether this can be conceptualized as the brain evolving or actually waking up. Are those terms that we can use to think about what's going on in this disorder?
Evolving meaning through natural selection or through ontogeny or?
Well, we don't know what was in the questioner's mind.
It's conceivable that these intrasensory interactions and mind-body interactions are more pronounced in humans and higher primates than say in a rat. We do know there's tremendous amount of in the left angular gyrus and left inferior parietal lobule. There's a tremendous amount of convergence of sense modalities from occipital, parietal, from touch and vision and hearing and vestibular sense, much more so than other animals. So we tend to associate sensory systems much more powerfully than other animals. But if it's quite straightforward, like reaching for an object with a prism, you see it in monkeys too. But these interactions become more pronounced in humans, so there may be something to that. And obviously, RSD involves such interactions. So there may be something. It's not an easy question to answer.
But. In the closing minutes, there's one other question which came from the audience that I think would be fun for both of you to address. I'll just read the question as the questioner wrote it. From the point of view of the question, what am I? What is the brain? I wonder if you can just share your thoughts.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What is
the question is, from the point of view of the question, what am I? What is the brain?
Well, yeah, these types of questions are hard to deal with, and I think that the important when you talk about things like what is the I, right? What is the I within me? There are really two questions there. One is metaphysics, and the other is neuroscience, psychology, introspective psychology, and all of that. Metaphysics is there's this vast universe, the physical world, scientific materialism, Big Bang theory, and all of this is taking place, unfolding. So this teeny weeny little speck, 1/1,000,000th the size of an electron, and then we're all here having this conversation. But it's all implied in that little speck. There's a bunch of, maybe a tiny number of laws. And all, my conversation with you is already in there, right? And then the whole thing unfolded. That's scientific materialism, right? But scientific materialism denies the existence of an observer. In fact, it's an observer-free universe. But get rid of qualia. Okay, there's an objective world out there. I don't have any special vantage point. I'm just. So where does this vantage point illusion come from? Why me? Why here? Why now? That's a problem for metaphysics. It's not a scientific question. The people who have written about it, like Erwin Schrödinger, it's in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, Indian philosophy. I'm not saying it's a stupid question. It's a perfectly meaningful question. There are people, two kinds of people, those who think metaphysics is meaningful, those who think it's rubbish, as you know. It's wordplay. Okay, that's all metaphysics. And the scientific question about the I, the nature of the self, we were shown in many experiments that some of your experiments, some of our experiments, clinical studies, so it's not the monolithic entity that it believes itself to be. There are many selves and many I's, including the one attached to your sense of being a person. And the I has many attributes. It has a sense of agency. I can move and grab something. Sense of continuity in time. I can engage in time travel to and fro. Contemplate the future. Think about the past, and travel back and forth in time. I have a sense of being anchored in my body. All of this can be disrupted in brain disease. So all of it emerges from activity of neurons in the brain. This can be studied empirically, which is what Beau and I do, and other people do. So there are two distinct questions there, which you don't want to get confused with me.
Beau,
my answer is much more boring, which is that basically the brain is the functional architecture of the brain is a physical manifestation of its history, and it's that history that defines us. So that's how I would make the distinction or the relationship between the self, which is our history, and the structure of the brain, which is a representation of that history.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Beau and Rama for opening this wonderful session.